And we got Mike Lee up next, Head of Enterprise Payment Architecture at Capital One. We're continuing the live action, and we're hoping everything goes well. We're going to continue to kind of bring this kind of coverage of Redis Labs, which is doing phenomenal work, and anyone who's programming knows the value of having Redis in their system. Mike, thanks for coming on the post-keynote conversation.
Hey John, how are you?
Great to see you. Capital One, we've covered on theCUBE, certainly at reInvent and other areas. You guys are 100% cloud footprint, something other banks talk about or don't even dream about. Why this approach? I mean, what's the benefits? How do you see the business impact of Capital One's as you look at, head of payment architecture? It's a big deal. What's the impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, us moving to the cloud offers us a lot of advantages with our cloud first strategy. It gives us speed and agility. And, I think that's probably the number one leading reason for being in the cloud. We're able to provision our footprint in minutes, so we can spin things up really quick. We can scale to meet our customer demand. We can right size applications. And I think that's really, a huge advantage. Some of the other things that the cloud allows us to do is we're able to measure and maintain our footprint with a pretty high degree of accuracy. So a lot of those costs are now out of the data centers and into the cloud, which is very easily measurable. So that allows us to get our head around our utilization, what that looks like, our cost projections, and ultimately our compliance. So, with things like security, when we talk about compliance, we're also able to, shift those workloads. The cloud gives us a unique ability to do that, in that we can, stand up blue-green deployments, we can move our stuff, and then from a security perspective, apply all of our patches and upgrades and whatnot, pretty seamlessly.
You guys are very active in the open source, which is, I see you guys at all the different events out there. You contribute, you use it. What's the angle on the open source? What's your take on the contribution, the benefits as it evolves? Obviously tier one citizen, open source has become the table stakes now in many commercial organizations. Capital One, you guys got really high bar for, support for to be a viable component of the production systems. Talk about the motivation of open source and just some of your experiences.
Sure. So moving away from vendor only to the open source community, has kind of shifted developers, I think, from doing a lot of low value work to more high value work. A lot of that low value work can just be picked up and done by really anybody in the open source community, and the high value work is really where that gets resolved. So what are the features that people are looking for, and how do we drive that? That footprint? It also offers us things like a lower total cost of ownership. So when we're developing, large pieces of software, that software is constantly moving. So that's not, we have to stand up a whole big project around it and whatnot. It's always being developed. And so, I think that's our main motivations. And it also offers us a couple things like advertising, right? I mean, you're able to get out there and say, hey, this is what we're doing here at Capital One. This is great stuff. It attracts great talent. And, and we can then take advantage of those force multipliers around that open source community.
Yeah, congratulations. I think it's a great leadership position, one, for you guys to take advantage of that, but also within the open source community, you're seeing a lot more end user contribution, participation. That, to me, this is a huge wave. It's going to get bigger and bigger in my opinion, so great stuff. I got to ask you about the keynote, real time, obviously was the theme. Ofer was talking about the early days of Redis and how they started, and now the VC investments, a ton of money is coming in because of the relevance of real time and the role of data. This is a huge part of the conversation. Obviously, you guys know a lot about real time. I mean, Real time, near real time, the definition always shifts, but in finance, you've got to be as real time as possible. What's the impact of this Redis conversation that they're talking about to the businesses with the real time impact? What's your take on that? What's your perspective?
Yeah, well, I think real time, in a traditional sense, was really more focused around your real time analytics. It showed you the data, and what we're trying to get into, and what I think the newer definition of real time is it really kind of centers around the real time execution of things. And so, from a payments perspective, we're able to start queuing things up in a way where the networks are starting. When I say the networks, the rails are starting to support that real-time money movement. So you've got customer expectation, which is coming in and saying, "Hey, we want to see these. We want to see money moved immediately." And then, how do we support all that sort of that stuff? And so, Redis has helped us in leveraging that real-time data to make it available, transparent, and to all of our different systems simultaneously. So it really gives us that kind of business level parallel processing that we can do in order to get into that real-time execution part of the story.
That's awesome. I'd love to ask you one quick question while I got you here as we wrap up. What's next gen payments mean to you? When you think about that, when you look at all the benefits coming from the goodness of open source and Redis, among other things, you're talking about next gen, what we're talking about here. What's that mean to you?
Yeah, so next gen to me is really about being able to have your money and move your money where and when you need it to. And I think that's, as the networks are maturing and we're starting to provide different things, you're seeing, Bitcoin, and you're seeing, things like FedNow and different ways to move money. That's the, that's I guess the impetus of it all, where we're going with that next gen kind of conversation. I think it being fungible, as a bank, you have to respond to it being fungible. You have to respond to it being as real time and directed as possible. And then I think, where AI plugs into all of this, starts giving you kind of real time fraud analytics, how you can see that data, because that data is now exposed. You can do routing and other interesting things with having that data right in front of you instead of tied up in a vendor system or tied up in a network.
That's awesome. Final question for you. I think we've got a minute or two left. Cloud and OSS systems, balancing that pioneering of open source with some of the government governance and compliance issues and risk. Quick thoughts on being a trailblazer and balancing that innovation with the basic business compliance stuff.
Yeah, with open source and balancing all that stuff, it is a balance. It is a balance. But I think, some of the things that we are able to do is like real-time scanning of our data to make sure that we're following the right, software licensing agreements, making sure that we're, supporting all the best practices, taking care of code flaws and vulnerabilities. Because, these things are obviously going to seep into your systems. And ultimately, as it comes to fruition and we start to build those data pipelines fit right into our DevOps flow. And so within that DevOps, we're able to more real time analyze the code, not only in the repositories, but as it's being deployed.
Yeah, that's awesome. You guys are great. Love following your work at Capital One. Congratulations. And thanks for coming on and sharing here on the Keynote Post live coverage.
Awesome.
CUBE Redis Labs coverage. Thanks for coming on, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John. Take care.
Okay, I'm John Furrier with theCUBE. We got another guest, but Capital One is just such an innovator. We've talked with them on theCUBE. We've listened to them talk at reInvent and trade shows around the industry, around cloud native, and a great use case of pushing the envelope with DevOps in a big commercial way.